Well, good morning, Timberlake Church. What a great way to start our Sunday together. My name is Jason. I have the honor and privilege of getting to lead in this community and lead our staff team here in Duval. And I'm very excited to be up here with you all this morning. As we get started, though, I don't know if anybody else thought the same thing, but as Mark was talking about what a beautiful week it was, I was so sure he was going to mention the Seahawks game last night. I was like so ready. And then he left that on the table, but that's okay. It's more for me, I guess. All right, as we get started today, I heard this story this week that was somehow hilarious and almost concerning at the same time. I'll show you what I mean. I heard a story about a city in Arizona by the name of Show Low. Show Low, and this is like according to various documented sources, the name Show Low actually resulted from a poker game that was played between two men who were equal partners on a 100,000-acre ranch. The man who ended up having this town really named for what would happen next was a man by the name of Corydon E. Cooley, and him and his partner decided that there wasn't enough room for the both of them on this 100,000 acres, like you do. And just for reference, the entire city of Duval is 1,500 acres. So they had however many times that and decided, okay, this is not enough room for both of us, so what are we going to do? The next most logical thing, we're going to play a game of poker, and whoever wins takes the entire thing. And so they started this game of 7-Up. And this card game, as it started, as it went on, it actually drug on and on and on until Cooley's partner turned to him and said, if you can show low, you win. That means if he can show a lower card, then he wins the entire thing. And Cooley turned to him and said, show low it is, and pulled out the 2 of clubs, the lowest card in the game, and won the entire game. The entire ranch and the city that is now there is known by Show Low. In fact, there's a monument on the city commemorating this poker game. And their main street, to this day, is named Deuce of Clubs. Everything, every city, every person, every business, all of us have a story. Maybe your story isn't quite as out there as Show Low, but all of us have a story. All of us are shaped and influenced by the people and the environment and the events that unfold around us. Well, today, really, we're in this moment in the middle of a series called Starting Point. And throughout this series, we've been talking about various building blocks of our faith, what it takes for us to have a mature and meaningful faith in 2026. And we started with a talk about growth. During our talk about growth, we talked about how growing isn't like the way I approach and maybe you approach New Year's resolutions, where we put something up on the calendar, we pick a couple, and we just put the most effort we can possibly muster for, if you're like me, 2 or 3 weeks, and then say, okay, well, I'm going to negotiate myself back down. No, growth for people who have decided to follow Jesus actually is about heart change and living in a way that flows out of that new heart, not that new effort. It's about walking in the new life that we have been given. After that, Lance came up last week and he talked about grace. And he talked about how God's grace really means that faith and following Jesus isn't at all about what you and I can do. It's all about what God has already done. Today, as we get a little bit further into this series, and as we talk about what happens when we understand grace and we understand growth, I'm going to say something controversial, that you can believe in Jesus by yourself, but you cannot follow Jesus by yourself. Here's what I mean. You can believe by yourself, but you cannot pray for other people without knowing how to pray for them. You cannot step in and exercise patience and grace and kindness towards other people in your life or experience the same thing from them if you are alone in your life. You can not serve one another. You cannot learn to love other people. You cannot choose to care for people who are in crisis if you cultivate for yourself a life in isolation. All of us are shaped by others. We're shaped by the environment that we find ourselves in. All of us are made for connection throughout our life. In the early 1900s, the section of the government that oversaw what is now known, and for the most part then too, as Yellowstone National Park, decided that they were going to complete a couple of efforts to go and make sure that the park was safer for guests and especially better for the animals that lived there. And so they went in and they went through this process of removing the predators, especially the wolves, from throughout Yellowstone National Park. And at first, they saw what looked like a good response. Elk populations began to grow, but then they began to explode and balloon out of control. The elk ate through all of the vegetation that they could get to in Yellowstone National Park, and plants started dying and receding. After that, the root systems from these plants that had died no longer held the banks of the rivers in place, and the rivers themselves started to change shape and erode away, all because of the removal of wolves from the ecosystem. But when they decided to reintroduce wolves into Yellowstone National Park, the environment totally changed as it fell back into balance. And just like Yellowstone National Park, you and I are shaped by, connected to, influenced by all of the environments and people around us. In Utah, we can find actually the largest living organism in the world. I don't know if you know this, but it is called Pando. It is a grove of aspen trees that at first looked like 40,000 different individual trees, but actually it turns out every one of these trees shares the same root system, and they grow out of each other's roots. This huge grove of aspens actually is one single living organism that shares a root system, and it is interconnected. They hold each other up during storms and when it snows. The entire organism together weighs 13 million pounds. We were made, just like Pando, to be interconnected with the people around us, to be supported by the people around us, the way our world works best, the way that people and creatures and even trees survive and thrive is in connection with the people and things and environment around them. Nobody thrives in isolation. And you probably know this from your own life. You can probably look back on a time that you felt really lonely, that you felt really disconnected, and that you would say, this was not a time in my life that I was thriving. But we actually see this same sort of interaction play out in a story from the New Testament of the Bible. And I want to give you just a little bit of context before we dive in. Jesus has come onto the scene, and he is in the process of recruiting followers to come and study under him, to be what the Bible will call disciples for the next few years. And he has gathered 4 or 5 young men to come and follow him. And at this point, he approaches a young man named Philip. And we read this in John 1. Jesus, he found Philip and said to him, "Come and follow me." And Philip does something actually kind of odd, kind of surprising as a response to this. He says, "Okay, I'll do it, but I need a minute. Give me just a second and I'll be right back." And so he runs down and he finds his buddy by the name of Nathanael. And we see this next. Philip went to look for Nathanael, and he told him, "We have found the very person Moses and the prophets wrote about. His name is Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth." Now, look how quickly Philip even gets his own story wrong. Jesus comes out to find him. He meets Philip. He invites Philip to follow him, and Philip immediately runs and says, "We have found the very person that Moses and the prophets wrote about." And as he steps into this moment, as he encourages Nathanael to come and join him, Nathanael actually, he thinks that Philip's made a mistake. He says, "Look, it's been hundreds of years that our Jewish people have been looking for our Savior, for our Messiah, and this person, he's just not impressed." In fact, this is how he responds. He says, "Nazareth," exclaimed Nathanael, "can anything good come from Nazareth?" He just decides, okay, my response is I'm going to dig on Jesus' hometown. He just dishes on it. He is not interested. He has no further desire to continue the conversation. And at this point, it would have been very reasonable, very possible for Philip to just accept it and walk away. Or he could have argued. He could have fought back against Nathanael. But instead, he just takes a simple step to invite him. He says this, Come and see for yourself, Philip replied. And so to this invitation, nothing else to it, Nathanael decides to accept. And he goes and he finds Jesus with Philip. And when Jesus speaks to him, something changes. He speaks to Nathanael in a way that cuts down his defenses, that cuts down his barriers, and that changes Nathanael's entire view of Jesus and the rest of the world. And Nathanael's response to Jesus is simply, Rabbi, you are the Son of God, the King of Israel. This sudden 360 approach to how he understood Jesus. But that would have never happened except for the people that Nathanael chose to associate with. People like Philip who were listening to and caring about and paying attention to, looking for the way that God would show up in their lives. Our faith is shaped entirely in so many ways by the people we surround ourselves with. You know, in high school, really early high school, and then throughout until I graduated, I had a number of youth leaders who came and spoke into my life. Men who I still remember by the name of Brian Mars, Lucas Reed, Shane Crum, Jeff Wilson, who showed up over and over year after year, and they spoke into me, and they believed in me, and they called me to something more than how I was living as a high schooler. And then eventually, as I got out of high school into college, my youth pastor at the time, who led this group of men, he's a man by the name of Phil Eubank, decided he saw enough in me that he would go and he would offer me a job. And really, that job, which started here in Bellevue, actually came to a job offer when Phil became the lead pastor at a church in Colorado. And I moved across the country to be a part of what was going on. And working at that church gave me an entirely new paradigm for how to understand and do church, for how to view ministry. The faith that you and I experience is so deeply shaped by the people we surround ourselves with. And so, as we talk about the building blocks of faith, we have talked about growth, and we've talked about grace, and today we're going to talk about groups. And, you know, I could say community, I could say relationships, but let's be honest, we're like 3 in on the G's on all of the points here, so we're going to stick with it. But the most important response to what we talked about last week, grace, the most important response is for us to surround ourselves with people who are going to encourage us, to surround ourselves with the right people. And so as we talk about groups, I really want to cover today the purpose and importance of 2 kinds of groups. And the first one is larger groups. Larger groups are ones like this. They're groups that are for worship and celebration. Now, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on larger groups because I think you maybe already get it. You showed up here today. Even if this is your first time here at Timberlake, welcome. We're so glad you're here. You probably are starting to understand what a Sunday morning looks like here for us. And we believe larger groups are best for worship and celebration. And so that's what we do here every Sunday. We learn and we ask that our hearts get softened, and we step into this next phase of whatever God has for you and has for me, reoriented as a community around God's words. And really, there's a bunch of amazing things that happen when we gather as a larger group. We get this opportunity to leverage our resources, to leverage our energy, to leverage our talents, and all of the ways that you're so much better at so many things than I am. And I'm better at maybe 1 or 2 things maximum than all of you are. And we come together not as people who really need to measure, but instead people who complement each other by showing up with our gifts and energy and talents and resources. And honestly, this is also why I love the fact that Timberlake is this multi-location model. If you want more details about that, I would love to invite you to come to Discover on February 1st. You can find more info scanning the QR code in front of you. But as a multi-location model, we have been able to create this kind of impact that's far bigger than what any one church building would be able to do by ourselves. Any one church gathering would be able to do by ourselves. We have this massive impact that we got to see. We're doing 6 mission trips this year, and the first one is just about filled. Yeah, that's amazing. We get to have these amazing opportunities and programs for kids and for students multiple times a week at multiple locations. we have just the most outstanding band up here. Can we just give a round of applause for our band? A couple of them in the room. Yeah. I am so proud of what we're able to do up on stage each and every morning. And I hope for you that it's not just good music, but that it's meaningful, that it hits you someplace in the heart, that it helps you get connected to God just a little bit easier. But our ability to have an impact because we gather together as a larger group doesn't just happen here in this building, but it happens near throughout our community and far across the world. And that is because we get to gather and celebrate and link arms and say we are going to work together to make a difference in our community and beyond. But there's this interesting thing that happens pretty often when I'm out maybe at a grocery store or at a restaurant or connect with somebody who knows about Timberlake, and we hear this phrase, and there's nothing wrong with this phrase, but here's what it sounds like. Somebody will say, I love your church, or Timberlake is the church that I go to. And great, love it. I'd love for you to go to this church. But my hope is for us that we get to move from that to Timberlake is my church, which I belong to. That really, in this moment, we would if you have in you anything that says, oh, I love your church. Look, again, nothing wrong with it. I love the music. I love the services. I love the teaching. Obviously, the super handsome pastor, fantastic. Yeah. If you guys didn't laugh, that would have been really awkward. Special events. But instead, that we would move from Timberlake is like I love your church to I love our church. That this would become a place with like maybe a different level of excitement when we do this. That this would become a place where we all feel the permission to own getting to celebrate things like we see on this screen, where we're getting to go out to these really impactful mission trips in the United States and beyond, and all of the other ways that we've been able to have an impact here, near, and far. And I know that as people in Seattle, we're actually pretty good at doing this. Let me prove it to you. Seattle Seahawks fans are the perhaps most fiercely identified fans, at least in my totally unbiased opinion, in the NFL. And it's because we're not treated as or understand ourselves as just spectators, but part of Seattle's sports culture is that we are in some way important to, essential to, part of the team. In fact, over 40 years ago now, the Seahawks retired the 12th man jersey number 12 for the fans and the people who show up each and every week to view their games online or in person. And so they officially retired this jersey number to represent the 12th man, the member of the spectators, all of us who show up. And I know some of you are like, I'm not a Seahawks fan. I'm lumping you in. Today we're all Seahawks fans together. Lumping you in here, that we get to show up, and the part of the culture is that we are treated as if we are a part of the team, and to the point that Seahawks fans are some of the loudest fans in the entire country. We are famous for being loud. In fact, a few years ago, the Guinness Book of World Records recorded Lumen Stadium at 137.6 decibels, setting a new record in the United States. It prompted a man in the audience to make a famous sign with a slogan that I tell our audio guy each and every week: louder. Okay, I thought that would be funnier, but whatever. The opposing teams actually during that year had the highest number of false starts, highest rate of false starts in the NFL while playing at Lumen Field, and players consistently complained that they couldn't hear the plays that were being called. And this is because we, as a fan base, show up and we understand that, and really, let's be honest, the marketing team for the Seahawks understands that marketing us as members of the team builds a different level of excitement. And so today, at the beginning of every game, the 12th man flag is raised, and not often by the owners or people who invest in the team so much as by former players, local heroes, and community leaders. And we love the Seahawks, again, lumping you in whether you like it or not, because it's our team. And I would love for us to see this place the same way. I want you to love Timberlake Church because it is your church. And really, for something like the Seahawks, there's so many marketing elements to making us feel like a member of the team. But for a church, there's really one thing that's the glue that holds everything else together, and that is your connection to people in relationships. Your and my connection to other people is what locks us in to a place like this church. All right, so this is really the approach and the mindset around larger groups, but because relationships are so important, what I want to do is spend a few minutes talking about smaller groups. And smaller groups are for relationships and community. And there are all sorts of different ways to connect in smaller sized groups at Timberlake. Whether it's choosing to join a team that's serving, volunteering, whether it's out in the lobby or during the week. We've got people who come in to prep the weekend just to be ready each and every weekday in and day out. Whether it's choosing to just introduce yourself to somebody that you've recognized has sat next to you or in your same section at the same service time that you're here for over and over again. Just the choice to say hi and introduce yourself to the lobby when you're getting donuts or coffee with somebody that you've seen here before. Or, of course, the core of this for us is our groups system. But the reality is that one of the most pervasive lies that our culture has told each and every one of us is that community is something that you and I need to go out and find. Community is not something you find. It's not just sitting there waiting for you like a puzzle missing the final piece that you need to go slot in to that spot. It's not just like finding the exact right people at the exact right time, the exact right group, and then all of a sudden you experience community. No, community is not something you find. It is something you build. It is something that requires you to be intentional. It's something that requires you to show up and put energy into. It is something that requires a different level of engagement than even showing up on Sunday morning does. It requires cultivating with work and effort. And I know you and I have probably heard this before, but this is true, that the quality of our life is always determined by the quality of our relationships. Just last week, Jelly Roll was featured on the cover of Men's Health. Some of us know Jelly Roll, right? Yeah, all right. Well, I'm about to start a fight because I am not a fan of country music. I don't like it at all. But I've been following Jelly Roll for a little while now because I've found his story so interesting and compelling. You see, over the last 5 years, Jelly Roll lost 275 pounds. He was arrested for the first time at age 14, and he went to jail more than 40 times over the course of a decade. His early years were marked by crime, addiction, and incarceration. And eventually, Jelly Roll was really written off by most of the people in his life as a lost cause. And then something changed. He switched up his people. In fact, today, he has decided that he is removing people from his life who are going to enable him. And he gives credit to Jesus, to his wife, and his close friends, not for just encouraging him and just showing up and being positive all the time, not for never saying anything hard or harsh, but by actually them showing up and expecting more from him. And this is something that we can see a story like this and we can say, oh, wow, that seems like a new idea. That seems so exciting. I would love to try that. But really, this is wisdom that's been around in our world for over 3,000 years. There's a man by the name of King Solomon who wrote part of the Old Testament of our Bible. And he says this: walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. That for us, it really doesn't have to be that complicated. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. We mature by surrounding ourselves with mature people. And we get deeper, locked in and learned about our beliefs and our values and the best way for us to show up in our family and our business and our relationships when we surround ourselves with people who share those values and those connections and who also want to build those relationships. And so, smaller groups give us something that the larger ones do not give. Smaller groups give us really a handful of things that we don't find necessarily in everyday life. First one is dialogue. There are conversations that you and I have that maybe never leave our home, and nobody who disagrees with us or understands the world differently or had a different experience has the chance to talk with that. And we know that it's maybe a culturally hot topic or it's going to be difficult to have a conversation about it. And so we just don't ever talk with somebody who sees the world different. We might not even think about the message that I'm talking about right now or our Bibles outside of Sunday mornings. And small groups give us the option, they give us the opportunity and really the invitation to wrestle through those ideas in a way that we might not have had otherwise. And for us, every season is different. You know this. The season that was before you had kids is different than the season that was before you were married. And it's different than the season now if you've got kids who are a little bit older, they're out of the toddler stage, maybe they're out of diapers. Every season is different for us. And for us to be able to dialogue with people who are experiencing the same season differently or experiencing an entirely new season that we don't even see coming yet enables a different way of responding and following Jesus that we would have had otherwise. Number two is care. Many of us find our deepest care are like relational first responders in our family. But for many of us, we did not grow up around family who was a safe and helpful person to show up in our lives. And for even more of us, we love our family, we'd love for them to show up, but we're just geographically separated from them. And groups give the opportunity for you to experience that kind of family connection with people who are here in your church, who share your values and are connected in ways that maybe your and my family isn't. And I've seen over and over, including a story from like 4 days ago, where groups members showed up as really the first responders in another person's crisis, showed up to care and to meet needs and to make meals and to fill up a GoFundMe, whatever it takes to respond when crisis hits. But the reality is that you and I cannot microwave community. We cannot wait until a moment when the crisis hits and then try to build those friendships out of a 30-second blast of connection. What happens is when we need to build community, when we need to have the support systems required for you and I to get through the crisis that you and I maybe don't see coming, but God knows is coming, and that other people in your community group may have potentially already experienced, we have the opportunity to build that community when things are okay or when things are going well so that we have it when we need it. When things happen, we know your kid falls off the rails and you thought you did everything right and you do not know what to do or how to respond. And if you are alone, if you are not connected with other people who have gone through similar things or who are at least parents, then the ability to have a community to show up and respond it's not going to happen overnight. When your character begins to fray, when it starts to fall apart, when those pressures at work get to a point that you just weren't ready for, and you start seeing those temptations come that you never thought would be aimed at you, that you never thought would look enticing, you and I need to have community ready before that happens. You can believe in Jesus by yourself. You cannot follow Jesus by yourself. The New Testament of the Bible is full of commands, invitations, and ideas that are from us towards other people in our lives. In fact, a man named Paul, who wrote this letter to a church in the city of Ephesus, gave this as one of just so many commands and encouragements for the churches that he wrote to. He said, always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making an allowance for each other's faults because of your love. And if you show up here and you are just here on Sundays, there's no need really to be patient. I mean, let's be honest. It's not patience to have to wait for one or two more people to get through the coffee line ahead of you. It's not patience to wait 25, 30 seconds. Maybe it's longer than that. I don't know. I haven't had to pick up my kids in a hot minute from down here while there's a line. But to wait for other people to get through picking up their kids before you head out for the rest of your Sunday. But when you show up in a small group, when you show up and somebody brings up a conversation topic that you really don't want to have, when they have a different way of approaching something or a different way of looking at something than you've ever thought of, you and I are challenged to show up with patience, to show up with allowance for other people's faults. And let's be honest, for you and for me, for them to show up with the same thing for us. In large groups, we can ignore the people who make this challenging. But in smaller group settings, we have the opportunity to live out our faith. Next, small groups allow us to provide and experience accountability. And what I don't mean, I kind of don't like the word accountability, because what I don't mean is like long checklists or like super personal questions. What I really mean is you just can't be anonymous. You and I have the opportunity to show up in small groups where people are going to understand something about you, something about your life, something about your family, and it would be easy to walk out and disappear in a larger group setting, but in a smaller setting, it's difficult to do that. When we surround ourselves with people, we live better. We are more aware of how we talk to our kids or how we talk to our spouse when, let's say, your in-laws are in town. You are more aware of how you engage with people when you know that there are other people who are watching you, who are listening, who are maybe even learning from you. In fact, at the beginning of every year, one of our pastors, his name is John Torres, he's over all of our various ministries at Timberlake. He puts a group of staff members, different groups of staff members, into smaller groups to begin, for anybody who wants it, a fasting weekend where we take 3 days to go without food and just pray and connect with God. And it is a very difficult and annoying thing to do. And yet, when we do it with other people, it's way more fun, is way more encouraging, and it is way easier to get through, which actually brings me to the final thing that smaller groups provide. They provide fun. Now, I know fasting probably doesn't sound like a lot of fun, but I will tell you, the gifts and the laughter and the complaining in those group texts are something that I've come to love and expect at the beginning of every year. And the reality is that I've just never been a part of like a smaller sized group where we greet each other with these and thous, and we expect to like quote Bible verses towards each other, or where we sit back and sing hymns all out of tune. The truth is that you and I, when we show up to a moment like this, we can't force friendship, but we can put ourselves in environments where friendships can begin to grow. You and I can't force somebody to become one of our people, to become connected to us in any sort of meaningful community, but in order to get there, in order to build that friendship, in order to connect in community, it just requires you to show up in an environment that is built for just that. Our phrase for 2028, our focus as a church, is new ground. And as we think about new ground, as we think about what this looks like for our church, we're actually coming up in February on a series where we're going to talk all about what it means to take new ground. And what it looks like for me and what it looks like for Timberlake is going to be different than what it looks like for you. But in all of these cases, it should be around a group of people. It should be intentional. People should know what's going on in your life and encouraging you to step into it, to walk in the path that God has put in front of you. We are in our groups launch season. The last week we started, this week, next week, 3 weeks of opportunities to sign up for small groups around Timberlake Church, and this couldn't be a better time for you to start exploring what that looks like in 2026. So I'll end with this. Take a risk. Sign up for a group. Or if you don't see one that works for your schedule, don't see one that works for your stage of life, work with me to make your own. You didn't become who you are by yourself, and you cannot become who you need to be by yourself. Would you pray with me?